From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DePoy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome in. Thanks for watching. It's good to be back with you, and it's good to have you here this Wednesday. We begin this time with Metro's failure to reach agreement with the aerospace executive that the WMATA board tapped to become the transit agency's new general manager. WMATA wanted Neil Cohen to take over for the departed Richard Sarles, and it appears Cohen wanted the gig. And yet the two sides could not come to a deal. This is the first of several topics we'll tackle today with Maryland Congressman Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat. He represents the 8th District of Maryland. He's running for the U.S. Senate seat being vacated by the retiring Barbara Mikulski. He's with us through our Connect to Congress series. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much for your time.
Bruce, great to be with you.
Let's jump right in because there's so much to talk about today. Can you, you've been pushing Metro hard on a variety of fronts, safety first and foremost. Can you give us your reaction to their failure to sign Neil Cohen when it appeared that he was their choice, their finalist to be general manager?
Yes, Bruce. Look, this is the gang that can't shoot straight. The Metro board has really embarrassed itself. We've had a continuing series of issues with Metro safety, and all of us have said that you need to get somebody at the helm, somebody who's going to be at the steering wheel, who's going to be held accountable for this big organization and make sure that we protect passenger safety and make sure that Metro runs on time. And yet the board itself cannot get its act together to find the right person at the top. Look, people were already losing faith. This unfortunately just further undermines the credibility of Metro. It is essential that the states and the leaders in all these states get this done, make it happen. We've got to make sure we have a board that does the right thing. The board is setting, clearly a bad example for the whole system.
How optimistic are you, if at all, that at long last they will find someone good, they'll be able to sign that person and get them here and get them on board, and that those two things can happen quickly? In light of all that we've seen, what's your expectation now? Do you have any optimism at all?
Well, Bruce, it's hard to be optimistic. I mean, look, the time has been ticking for a very long period here. It's way overdue. Finally, it looked like they had something in the works, and then the whole thing collapses in public. So I don't know. I mean, I keep wanting to give the Metro board another chance, but every time we're giving them another chance, they drop the ball. The challenge here is when it comes to a board decision is that what we can do in Congress and in the public is simply keep on the heat. With respect to the safety issues, we have successfully intervened so that you now have, for example, the Federal Transit Administration involved in the safety oversight of the Metro system. So that was an important step forward. That was taken in response to the failures in Metro and members of Congress, many of us pushing the Federal Transportation Department and others to take those steps. So at least we're moving on that front, but when it comes to finding a person to put in charge, the board has clearly failed again.
I'm wondering whether the board is part of the problem and whether we need a fix at the board level. And I want to share with you and the folks at home comments from Governor Terry McAuliffe from just the other day. He released a statement saying, "I'm outraged by the latest setback in a process that would be comical if the need for new leadership at Metro were not so great. Identifying and hiring a qualified GM is the board's chief responsibility and the first step that must be taken in order to oversee the safety and operational changes that are essential to Metro. The leaks and petty political sniping that have come to define the work of this board are harming the Metro system and the economy of the region. The time has long passed for the board to bring this process to a close or for the governments that comprise the system to find board members who will." Are we at a point of serious rethinking here of the way this all operates, or the people in those important chairs?
Well, Governor McAuliffe is exactly right. Again, these board members are appointed by the different jurisdictions, and the folks doing those appointments have got to be on the phones right now telling the board members to get the job done or else come up with a new group. I mean, this has gone on for way too long. Frustration has boiled over. So, Governor McAuliffe and others are going to have to, figure out what to do about these board members.
Can you talk to us, Congressman, about the decision to deploy American Special Forces personnel to Syria? This administration has long maintained we would not have boots on the ground. Those of us who remember or studied Vietnam know that it started very small and it ended very large and very badly. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I share the concerns that you just expressed, Bruce. I have supported the President's efforts to provide training to the Iraqi government troops in Iraq and training to the Kurdish forces in Iraq and in Syria. I think we should be providing them with the weapons to fight the fight. But putting American troops on the ground, even in small numbers in Syria, I think takes us down a very, very dangerous road. The challenge has to be to make sure that we provide the forces in the region that want to push back ISIS with the greater capacity to do so. So, for example, many months ago when the Kurdish village of Kobani in Syria, along the Syrian-Turkish border, was about to be overrun by ISIS, the United States dropped the weapons support into the Kurdish forces, and the Kurdish forces were able to drive ISIS back. That should be the approach that we're taking. I've also, opposed what clearly turned out to be a failed effort to directly arm the so-called moderate rebels in Syria because it was clear from the beginning that their mission was not to go after ISIS. It was really to go after Assad. And I understand why they want to go after Assad, but until we have a game plan for what happens when Assad is no longer there, we need to be very careful, because right now, if there's a total power vacuum in Damascus and throughout Syria, ISIS is poised to be the beneficiary of that, and that is the worst case scenario. So let's focus on pushing back ISIS, but let's do it by providing training and support to the Kurdish forces, Iraqi forces, and other forces whose primary mission is going after ISIS.
Let's talk about what's happening on Capitol Hill right now, Congressman Van Hollen. We're finally seeing movement on a highway bill, perhaps not funded to the extent that some would like, but movement at long last nonetheless. This is an issue that is cried out for leadership and action. I know the bill has many provisions and it's still being worked on right now. Can you give us your thoughts? I know there's a particular provision that you want to highlight, but as far as the big picture of seeing action at long last, that is welcome news.
Well, that is welcome news. We've been pushing very hard to get a transportation funding bill passed, a national transportation funding bill. We could have done a lot better than this. In fact, I put forward proposals very similar to President Obama's proposals that would have dramatically boosted our national investment in modernizing our infrastructure and put in place a longer-term funding mechanism. Unfortunately, we didn't get a vote on that. We didn't get bipartisan support for that from our Republican colleagues. But this at least prevents us from falling backwards, which may not be a great standard, but it's certainly better to be, at least maintaining our existing levels of funding rather than going backwards.
And your predatory towing measure, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is included at least to this point.
Well, that's right. Congressman Don Beyer and I put forward an amendment on the floor of the House to end these incredibly abusive towing practices. These are some of the towing companies that really are taking advantage of consumers, and because of a quirk in federal law, the local jurisdictions, like Montgomery County or other counties in Maryland or Virginia, were actually unable to pass local ordinances to protect their consumers, to protect their constituents, because federal law prevented them from taking action. So what Don Beyer and I did was return the authority to protect consumers from this predatory towing practices to where it belongs, to the local jurisdictions, the county councils.
We only have a minute left, Congressman, but there's one more issue I want to broach with you, and that is one of the results from the election overnight, the victory of a Republican outsider running for governor in Kentucky, a candidate who campaigned against Obamacare. The term-limited incumbent governor of Kentucky, a Democrat, brought the Affordable Care Act to the state, and that meant that a lot of people who didn't have health insurance before have had it over the last few years. Will it strike you as strange and perhaps semi-tragic if people in a poor state who've had health insurance, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, lose it as the result of this election?
That would be very bad news for Kentucky. It would be a bad sign for the country. And interestingly, as you know, in Kentucky, the Kentucky health care system, the version of Obamacare, of the Affordable Care Act that was put in place in Kentucky, is very popular in Kentucky on a bipartisan basis. So I think this governor would be making a huge mistake, this new Republican governor in Kentucky, if he were to unwind that, especially because if you look at voter turnout, it was very low. And so nobody should read too much into an election that's based on very low voter turnout, or people do that at their own peril. But look, I mean, you're seeing this phenomenon, especially in the Republican Party, with numbers that Trump is seeing and the other candidates. It's really important that the rest of the country that's not part of this Tea Party faction recognize how important it is to get out to the polls, to get out to vote, because if they don't get out to vote, somebody else is going to be making the decisions for them. And as of now, it's this more extreme, sort of hard-edged ideological right. So everybody needs to be getting out and vote in the coming elections.
Maryland Congressman Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from the 8th, joining us from the Cannon Rotunda, part of our ongoing Connect to Congress series. Congressman, thank you very much for your time. It's always good to talk with you.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Bruce.
Take care. Talk to you soon. We'll take a quick break here. Scare talk about sky-high tolls and the impact it had on Tuesday's balloting in Virginia. That's next.